everyone, and welcome to another conversation of Parable Minutes. We are now going into a totally new part of the industry, and it is this word wellness, right? And I know that wellness, you immediately think of veganism, the diet you have, the lifestyle you lead, but wellness is a lot more than that. And I feel that, looking at the industries, looking at our work, right now, wellness is becoming integrated into almost every single industry. In fact, you will be hard-pressed to find any part of industry or art or creativity where there isn't an aspect of wellness in it. So these conversations now, we're going to be talking about, what place does wellness have now, what wellness will look like in every industry in the future. So we're going to be starting, right here in our industry, in the creative industry. And a lot of times, the idea of being well as a creator and doing good work, sometimes, these things can be quite at odds with each other, but we're going to crack that open in this first conversation with someone who is really, really great. She's in our studio. From this conversation, we'll be moving on to some really interesting people, which are centered around this idea of wellness. So thank you for joining us for this new conversation of Parable Minutes. Hey, Wen Ling, how's it going?
What's up?
Thanks for making time for this. Okay, so let's talk about wellness. As we go into this, we're talking about, what wellness means. I think it's really interesting because, as creatives, when I look back at my life and I think about the times where I was the most stressed out and the times I was most unwell, I can think about work being related to that for myself. The times where I felt the most kind of like satisfied, it has also to do with work and creating. So I wanted to just ask you, what does wellness mean to you? How does wellness changed for you, the notion of being well? I'm talking about you not just as a person, but you as a creator, as someone that kind of creates things.
I think when you're talking about wellness, you're essentially talking about one of prioritization, right? What do you prioritize? So do you prioritize rest? Do you prioritize feeling confident in what you're doing? I see it more like a journey of sorts. It's a bit like learning how to be in relationships. When you first start out, you don't really know what you're doing. And then after a couple, then you're like, actually, no, my priorities are different from when I first started out. And I wouldn't have known about those priorities until I went through those events, and that shaped my now perception of what I should be prioritizing, right? So I think definitely it's changed super drastically.
I remember times where I've lost sleep, I've broken into like cold sweats at night because of what I'm making or creating at the time. Whether it's serving a client, whether it's an idea. And I feel like there's this notion that, like the best design, the best creativity comes out of stress, or it comes out of like toil and all that, right? Is that true for you?
Going to design school and meeting all these like competitive people, the desire to be very competent, that's the way I'm looking at it.
Yeah.
I think that we kind of see wellness as, something to give up. It's not that important. You don't get anywhere unless you're like working yourself to the bone. It's a competition not for wellness, but it's like a competition of like how much you can sacrifice. I realized my standard of wellness is only as good as the company's idea of wellness, because wellness is not something that you do by yourself. Wellness is something that is either supported or like brought to life by the people you're working for. So if they have different priorities, if their idea of wellness is something like, financial wellness or like fame and reputation, right? Those are the things that are always going to be prioritizing straight up at the top of the list. So finding a company that understood that wellness was important and was doing everything that they could to kind of like support that in their own way. I'm not saying that the creative does not have personal responsibility when it comes to wellness. I'm just saying that it's something that it's a shared responsibility.
Your idea of wellness is not so much a health regime, but you said it is a choice you make, a priority, and is a journey. Something that I think is really, really big that we are starting to talk about now is that the days of having the designer or the creator that makes this massive impact, they sold their life and then they do this amazing project and it's like this shooting star, right? Boom, it's amazing. And then after that, they're like,
it's gone.
It's gone. They're dried up, they fizzled out. But I think now our version of wellness and our thought is longevity. How do I position myself? Not for the immediate kind of like amazing win, but how do I position myself that I'm going to be around in this industry for a long time? And if I'm around long enough, then the way that I create will then also grow.
Yes.
You being kind of Wen Ling and in a way futuristic, what do you think in our industry, in the industry of creating, what do you think wellness is going to look like in our industry in the next 5 years?
5 years. I think you're going to start seeing a lot of people think that the best way to do it is to go on their own. They exist as an independent creator because the idea is that, if I am doing this to myself, it's not going to be as bad as someone else doing it to me, right? And I'm then the sole person in charge of my wellness. I can stop anytime I want. But then that makes for very fragile stability of rice bowl, for starters. And as an industry, you need people who are there showing up all the time. I mean, there's a host of problems that comes with an industry that relies solely on people who are like freelancing or completely independent. I think you're going to start to see a lot of people who are also going to feel less like traditional designers in whatever field they're in. They're not going to look like what we think designers, I mean, in the old generation, what we think they should look like, what their work should look like, how they should behave, how they conduct themselves during meetings, and social constructs of like etiquette, of industry standard in terms of work. All those things are going to go out the window.
You're saying that as things start to get more fragile, in a sense, like you said, there are splinter studios, freelancers, right? You get less volume in the communities. That means like in communal design, what suffers at the end of the day actually is the client. It is the projects, it's the output, because you get smaller studios who are maybe healthier. I'm not sure how long they'll be around for, but then they're not putting out work with the depth when you have that experience behind it. But then you get these like larger or older studios with that depth and the experience, but then without the energy and without the freshness of the ideas. Basically everybody loses, right? And it's almost like this insolvency that starts to happen creatively, kind of like how a market can crash. Like what happens when a creative market crashes? When there's a crash in ideas and innovation and beauty, right? That's kind of scary. And wellness, like you said, actually helps to bring people together in a better way. The thing I always think about is the designer. What does it mean for designers as they grow and they build a life? What does it mean for the work? It means the clients and what the output is. At Parable and in other studios who kind of share the way that we think, I think having these conversations are really important to remind ourselves, to like always try to structure projects, try to structure salaries, rewards, always try to kind of constantly be open to those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. That was great talking to Wen Ling about creativity and wellness. And I believe that she speaks for a lot of creatives out there. And whether you're a student, you're in your first job, or whether you've been doing it for a long time in the creative industry, more and more wellness is going to become top of the mind for studios and businesses who are wanting their creatives to not just be in it for the short term, but they're looking for creatives to be creating beautiful, useful, innovative things for the long term. And there is this beautiful equity, I feel, when it comes to creatives being in all the industries, because creatives help all the different industries to communicate. Creatives breathe life into the ideas. Creatives bring inspiration and innovation, all the different areas of every industry. And wellness, I do feel, is a massive key in the way that creatives can continue to do that for the industries. Looking at every country's or every industry's creative value, you want to be able to keep the liquidity of creativity, keep the healthiness of creativity flowing in the markets, and so it doesn't cannibalize in itself. And this is some of the most important things that we never really get to talk about as creatives, because a lot of the time we're not talking about being well, we're talking about being successful. These two things are starting to come together, and this conversation is kicking off into more conversations of being well as a creator in the industry. So stay tuned for more Parable Minutes.